In the grand halls of Ashbourne Hall, a wealthy man is found dead in a locked study, poisoned with cyanide, his will missing. Hercule Poirot, the sharp-eyed detective, spots a tiny clue, a handkerchief with a green thread, that everyone else ignores. As secrets unravel, from hidden romances to bitter grudges, Poirot's little grey cells chase the truth through a web of lies. Was it the grieving daughter, her desperate fiancé, or the glamorous actress with a dark past? Just 30 seconds, dive into a thrilling murder mystery where one small thread holds the key to catching a killer. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ashbourne Hall. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light over Ashbourne Hall, a grand old house nestled in the green hills of the English countryside. Its tall stone walls, covered in ivy, stood proud, like a castle, from a storybook. The windows gleamed and the air smelled of roses and fresh-cut grass. Inside, the place buzzed with excitement. A big weekend party was about to begin, and Captain Arthur Hastings, my old friend, was there to tell the tale. I'm no writer, but I'll do my best to share what happened, because believe me, it's a story worth telling. I stood in the driveway, gravel crunching under my shoes, watching fancy cars roll in. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the owner of this fine place, was a rich man who made his fortune building ships and trains. He wasn't the warmest fellow, sharp tongue, quick temper, but he loved throwing parties to show off his wealth. This one was special, though. Rumour had it he was about to make a big announcement, maybe about his money or his family. Nobody knew for sure, but you could feel the tension, like a storm brewing. Beside me stood Hercule Poirot, the famous detective. He's a small man, barely taller than my shoulder, with a neat moustache that curls just so. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, darted around, taking in every detail. He wore a crisp suit, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and he carried himself like he owned the place, though he was just a guest. Sir Reginald had invited him, probably to impress everyone. Poirot wasn't here to relax, though. He never was. His little grey cells, as he called his brain, were always working, sniffing out secrets. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice smooth with a French, no Belgian accent. "This house, it is magnificent, yes? But there is something in the air, a restlessness. Do you not feel it?" I shrugged. "Just a party, Poirot. People are excited, that's all." He tilted his head, his eyes twinkling. "Excitement, mon ami, or perhaps danger." I laughed. Poirot always saw mysteries where I saw nothing. But I'd learned to trust him. The man could spot trouble in a smile or a handshake. As we walked toward the big oak doors, I noticed the other guests arriving, each one looking like they belonged in a painting or a puzzle. First came Clara Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's daughter. She was young, maybe 25, with golden hair, pinned up, and a dress that shimmered like moonlight. She stepped out of a sleek black car, her face pale and serious. Clara hadn't lived at Ashbourne Hall for years, not since she and her father had a big fight. Nobody knew the details, but the servants whispered about it. She looked nervous, her eyes darting to the house like it held ghosts. Next was Edward Marlowe, Clara's fiancé. He was a tall, lanky fellow with messy brown hair and a shy smile. He painted pictures for a living, but word was he wasn't very good or very rich. He held Clara's arm, but she barely looked at him. I wondered if they were happy. Poirot nudged me, whispering, "The young man, he is anxious. His hands, they tremble." Then came Mr. Victor Langley, Sir Reginald's business partner. He was a stout man with a red face and a loud laugh, the kind that made you wince. His suit was expensive, but his tie was crooked, like he'd dressed in a hurry. He carried a leather case, probably stuffed with papers about ships or money. I'd heard he and Sir Reginald had argued recently. Something about a deal gone sour. Langley's eyes scanned the crowd, like he was sizing everyone up. Miss Vivian LaRue swept, in next, and she was a sight. A retired actress, she still moved like she was on stage, her red dress flowing, her dark hair piled high. She'd been famous once, starring in plays across London and Paris. Rumour said she and Sir Reginald had been close years ago, maybe two. Close. She flashed a dazzling smile, but her eyes were cold, like she was hiding something. Dr. James Hartley arrived quietly, a young man with glasses and a serious face. He was the local doctor, invited because he'd treated Sir Reginald's bad heart. He carried a small black bag, the kind doctors use, and kept to himself. He nodded politely, but didn't say much, his eyes fixed on the ground. Last was Mr. Graves, the butler. He wasn't a guest, of course, but he might as well have been, the way he carried himself. Tall and thin, with grey hair and a face like stone, he ran Ashbourne Hall like a general. He greeted everyone at the door, his voice low and proper. "Welcome, sir. Welcome, madam." But I caught him watching Clara a little too long, like he knew something she didn't. We all gathered in the grand hall, a room big enough to fit a small village. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and a huge fireplace roared, even though it was warm outside. Servants hurried about, offering drinks and tiny sandwiches on silver trays. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand. He was a big man, broad shoulders, grey hair, and a face carved with lines from years of hard deals. His eyes were sharp, like he could see through you. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice filling the room, "welcome to Ashbourne Hall. This weekend we celebrate and we settle matters." He paused, his gaze lingering on Clara. She stiffened. "Enjoy yourselves, but know this, changes are coming." The room went quiet. Changes? What did he mean? His will? His business? Nobody dared ask. Poirot leaned close to me. "The man speaks in riddles, Hastings. He enjoys the power, no?" Dinner was served in the dining room, a long table covered in white cloth and gleaming silver. The food was fancy: roast beef, creamy potatoes, and some French dish I couldn't pronounce. Clara sat across from Edward, barely touching her plate. Langley talked loudly about money, waving his fork like a sword. Miss Vivian laughed at his jokes, but it sounded forced. Dr. Hartley ate quietly, glancing at Clara now and then. Graves moved like a shadow, refilling glasses and clearing plates. Poirot, of course, noticed everything. He didn't eat much, just picked at his food, his eyes darting from face to face. After dessert, we moved to the drawing-room for coffee. That's when it happened, the moment that started it all. I was standing by a tall window, watching the sunset turn the sky, pink when Poirot tapped my arm. "Hastings, regardez! Look there, on the floor!" He pointed to a small white square near the sofa. A handkerchief, neatly folded, with a tiny C stitched in blue. I bent to pick it up, but Poirot stopped me. "Non, mon ami, observe first," knelt, his fingers brushing the cloth. "Interesting," he murmured. "This handkerchief, it is fine linen, but see this." He pointed to a single green thread, barely visible, caught in the stitching. "This thread, it does not belong. It is different." I squinted. "Just a bit of lint, Poirot. Probably Clara's. It has her initial." He shook his head, his moustache twitching. "Clara, perhaps. But this green thread, it is not common. It tells a story, Hastings. A story we must learn." He slipped the handkerchief into his pocket, and I rolled my eyes. A thread? Really? But I knew better than to argue. Poirot's hunches had a way of being right. The evening went on, with music from a gramophone and chatter filling the air. Sir Reginald was in a strange mood, laughing 1 minute, glaring the next. He pulled Clara aside, and I caught a few words. Will, responsibility, disappointed. She looked upset, her hands twisting together. Edward hovered nearby, looking lost. Langley kept drinking, his face redder by the minute. Miss Vivian told stories of her theatre days, her voice loud and dramatic. Dr. Hartley stayed quiet, sipping his coffee. Graves watched it all, his eyes like dark pools. As the night grew late, Sir Reginald stood. "I'm retiring to my study," he said. "Important papers to review. Good night." He gave Clara a long look, then left. The room felt colder after he was gone. Poirot and I stepped outside for some air. The gardens were dark, the air cool and sweet. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" I asked. "All this talk of changes." He twirled his moustache. "Sir Reginald, he is a man with enemies, Hastings. Perhaps in this very house. The handkerchief, it is a clue. Small, yes, but small things lead to big truths." I sighed. "You and your clues, it's just a party." He smiled, his eyes gleaming. "A party, yes, but in every party there is a shadow. We shall see, mon ami, we shall see." We went back, inside, and the guests started heading to their rooms. Clara and Edward whispered in a corner, her face pale. Langley stumbled, muttering about deals. Miss Vivian hummed a tune, her eyes distant. Dr. Hartley checked his watch, like he had somewhere to be. Graves locked the doors, his face unreadable. I didn't know it then, but that handkerchief, that tiny green thread, was the key to everything. The next morning, Sir Reginald would be found dead, and Poirot's little grey cells would be the only thing standing between truth and a perfect crime. But that's a story for another chapter. For now, Ashbourne Hall slept, its secrets tucked away in the dark, waiting for Hercule Poirot to shine a light on them. Chapter 2. The Locked Study. The morning sun crept through the heavy curtains of Ashbourne Hall, but it brought no warmth. I woke to the sound of a scream, sharp and piercing, slicing through the quiet like a knife. It was Clara Ashbourne's voice, coming from downstairs. My heart jumped and I scrambled out of bed, pulling on my jacket as I ran. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I reached the grand staircase just as Hercule Poirot appeared, his face calm but his eyes alert. He was already dressed, his suit perfect, his moustache neat as ever. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "that cry, it is not the sound of a happy morning. Come, quickly." We hurried down the stairs, following the sound of voices to the west wing, where Sir Reginald's study was. The hall was crowded with guests, their faces pale and confused. Clara stood by the study door, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Edward Marlowe held her shoulders, looking like he might be sick. Mr. Langley, the business partner, was shouting something about breaking the door down. Miss Vivian LaRue, the actress, stood back, clutching her shawl, her eyes wide. Dr. Hartley was there too, his medical bag already open, his face grim. Mr. Graves, the butler, hovered nearby, his usual calm cracked just enough to show worry. "What's happened?" I asked, pushing through. Clara's voice shook. "It's father. He's in there. I saw him through the keyhole. He's not moving." Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding the chaos. "Mademoiselle Clara, you must breathe. Tell Poirot exactly what you saw." She gulped, her words tumbling out. "I came to talk to him about last night. The door was locked. I knocked, but he didn't answer. I looked through the keyhole and he's at his desk, slumped over. He looks dead." The word hung in the air like smoke. Dead. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the man who'd stood so tall by the fireplace last night. Gone? It didn't seem possible. Langley pounded on the heavy oak door. "Open it, Graves. We need to get in." Graves shook his head. "Only Sir Reginald has the key, sir. He kept it on him." Poirot raised a hand. "Enough, monsieur. We must not touch the door yet. We wait for the police. This is a matter for order and method." I frowned. "Police? Poirot, we don't even know what's happened." His eyes met mine, sharp and serious. "Hastings, a man is seen through a keyhole, unmoving, in a locked room. This is no accident. We wait for Inspector Japp." As if on cue, the sound of a car engine rumbled outside. Graves went to the door and returned with Inspector Japp, a sturdy man with a red face and a no-nonsense look. I'd worked with him before, alongside Poirot, and he was a good man, though he sometimes missed the small things Poirot never did. Behind him came two constables, their boots loud on the polished floor. "Morning, Poirot," Japp said, tipping his hat. "Hastings, what's this mess about Sir Reginald?" Poirot explained quickly, his words precise. "A locked study, Inspector. Sir Reginald inside, perhaps dead. Mademoiselle Clara saw him through the keyhole. We have touched nothing." Japp nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Right, let's get that door open. Graves, you sure about the key?" Graves bowed slightly. "Yes, sir. Sir Reginald was particular. He locked the study himself last night." Japp turned to one of the constables. "Break it down." The constable, a big fellow, rammed his shoulder against the door. It groaned but held. Another constable joined, and with a loud crack the lock gave way. The door swung open, and we all peered inside. The study was a grand room, all dark wood and leather. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with thick volumes. A huge desk sat in the centre, papers neatly stacked, and there, slumped over the desk, was Sir Reginald Ashbourne. His face was grey, his eyes open but blank, his mouth twisted in a grimace. A glass of brandy sat beside him, half empty. The air smelled faintly bitter. like almonds. Clara gasped and turned away, burying her face in Edward's chest. Miss Vivian clutched her pearls, whispering, "Oh, how dreadful!" Langley swore under his breath. Dr. Hartley stepped forward, his medical bag in hand. "Let me check," Hartley said, his voice steady. He knelt beside Sir Reginald, feeling for a pulse, then shook his head. "He's gone. Been dead a few hours, I'd say." Japp frowned. "Cause?" Hartley sniffed the air, then the brandy glass. "Smells like cyanide. Poison, most likely. Fast and deadly." "Cyanide?" I said, shocked. "Who'd have that?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A question we shall answer, Hastings. But first we observe." Japp began barking orders. "Nobody leaves this house. Constables guard the exits. Poirot, you in on this?" Poirot gave a small bow. "If you permit, Inspector, I shall lend my little grey cells to the cause." Japp grunted. "Thought you'd say that. Right, let's look around." The study was sealed tight. The windows were locked from the inside, their latches rusted shut. No secret passages, no hidden doors, at least none we could see. The only way in or out was the door we'd broken, and Sir Reginald had the key, now found in his pocket. It looked like an impossible crime. Suicide, maybe. But why? Poirot moved carefully, his eyes scanning every inch. He stopped by the desk, near the brandy glass. "Inspector, regardez! Look here!" He pointed to the floor, where a small white square lay, almost hidden under a chair. Another handkerchief, just like the one from last night, with a blue C stitched on it. And there, caught in the stitching, was a single green thread. I stared. Another one? Clara's? Poirot shook his head. Perhaps. But this green thread, it is the same as the other. Unusual. Not from this house, I think. Japp snorted. A handkerchief. Poirot, we've got a dead man here. Let's stick to real clues. Poirot's moustache twitched, but he said nothing. He slipped the second handkerchief into his pocket, his face thoughtful. I knew that look. He was on to something, even if Japp wasn't. Dr. Hartley spoke up. No poison bottle or syringe. If it's cyanide, someone brought it here. Or it was in the brandy. Japp nodded. We'll test the glass. Anything else in here? We searched the room. The desk held papers, business contracts, letters, nothing unusual. A safe sat in the corner, locked tight. Graves said only Sir Reginald knew the combination. Poirot examined the lock on the door, now broken, and murmured, Interesting. This lock, it is old, but not so secure as it seems. What do you mean? I asked. He smiled faintly. Patience, Hastings. All in time. Japp turned to the guests who were huddled outside the door. Right. Who saw Sir Reginald last? Graves stepped forward. I did, sir. He went to his study after dinner, around 10. Said he had work to do. I locked the front doors and retired. Clara wiped her eyes. I wanted to talk to him, but he was angry last night. I didn't go. Edward nodded. We were in the garden till late, didn't see him. Langley shrugged. I was in the library reading, heard nothing. Miss Vivian fanned herself. I was in my room preparing for bed. Such a shock, poor Reggie. Dr. Hartley adjusted his glasses. I played billiards alone, then went to bed. Didn't hear a thing. Japp scribbled in his notebook. Nobody saw him after 10, and nobody heard anything. Heads shook. The room felt heavy, like everyone was hiding something. Poirot watched them all, his eyes like needles. "Inspector," he said, "may I suggest we question each person alone? The truth, it hides in the details." Japp sighed. "Fine, Poirot, but I'm leaning towards suicide. Man locks himself in, drinks poisoned. Brandy, end of story." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Suicide, perhaps. But where is the poison's container? No bottle, no vial. And this handkerchief, it does not fit a suicide." Japp waved him off. "We'll see. Hartley, get the body to the coroner. Constables, seal this room." As the group scattered, Clara sobbing, Langley muttering, Miss Vivian whispering to Edward, Poirot pulled me aside. "Hastings, this is no suicide. The handkerchief, the green thread, they are a message. Someone wishes us to see, but not to understand. Not yet." I frowned. "You think it's murder?" He nodded. "Oui, mon ami. And the killer is among us. The locked room, it is a trick. The handkerchief, it is the key. We must find where this green thread comes from." I glanced at the study, now empty except for the constables. Sir Reginald's body was gone, but his presence lingered like a shadow. The bitter smell of cyanide hung in the air, and I felt a chill. Poirot was right. This was no accident. Someone in Ashbourne Hall had planned this, and that green thread, so small, so easy to miss, was the clue everyone but Poirot overlooked. The day dragged on, with Japp questioning everyone in the drawing-room. Clara cried, saying she loved her father despite their fights. Edward stammered, his hands shaking. Langley was loud, insisting he had no reason to harm his partner. Miss Vivian played the grieving friend, her tears too perfect. Dr. Hartley was calm, professional, but his eyes darted to Clara too often. Graves answered every question with cold precision, like he'd rehearsed. Poirot listened, saying little, but I could see his mind working. He kept the handkerchiefs in his pocket, touching them now and then, like they held a secret only he could read. I tried to make sense of it. 2 handkerchiefs, both with a C, both with that strange green thread. Clara's? Or someone framing her? And why cyanide? Who could get it? By evening, the house was quiet, the guests sent to their rooms. Boo sat with us in the library, sipping tea. "No clear motive yet," he said. "Clara inherits, but she seems cut up. Langley's got business troubles, but nothing solid. The others? No reason to kill." Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes distant. "Reason, Inspector, is not always clear at first. The handkerchiefs, they tell a story." Chapter 3. The suspects assemble. The morning after Sir Reginald's death, Ashbourne Hall felt like a tomb. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle. Breakfast was served in the dining room, but nobody ate much. The clink of spoons against china was the only sound, and even that felt too loud. Clara Ashbourne sat at the far end of the table, her eyes red from crying. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, kept his hand on hers, but she barely noticed. Mr. Langley, the loud businessman, stirred his tea too fast, splashing it on the cloth. Miss Vivian Leroux, the actress, sipped coffee, her face pale under her makeup. Dr. Hartley, the young doctor, pushed his eggs around his plate, glancing at Clara now and then. Mr. Graves, the butler, stood by the door, his face like a mask, watching everyone. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, Captain Hastings, looking as neat as ever. His suit was pressed, his moustache perfect, but his eyes were sharp, darting from one guest to another. He hadn't touched his toast, just held his tiny coffee cup, watching, always watching. I knew that look. His little grey cells were working, piecing together a puzzle nobody else could see. Inspector Japp burst in, his heavy steps breaking the silence. "Morning all," he said, his voice gruff. "Nobody leaves this house till we sort this out. Poirot, Hastings, drawing room in 10 minutes. We're starting interviews." Clara's head snapped up. "Interviews? You think one of us killed him?" Japp shrugged. "Got to check everyone, Miss Ashbourne. No offence." She sank back, her face pale. Edward squeezed her hand, but his own fingers shook. Langley muttered something about wasting time, while Miss Vivian fanned herself with a napkin, her eyes wide. Dr. Hartley adjusted his glasses, saying nothing. Graves just bowed and left to prepare the drawing-room. Poirot leaned close to me. "Hastings, observe their faces. Fear, yes, but also secrets. Each one hides something." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he saw. To me, they just looked scared or sad. But Poirot had a way of spotting lies in a glance, or a fidget. We finished our tea and headed to the drawing-room, a big space with velvet curtains and a crackling fire. Japp had set up a table with a notebook and pen, looking like a schoolmaster ready to scold. "Right," Japp said, sitting down. "One at a time. We'll get the truth. Poirot, you joining?" Poirot gave a small smile. "Oui, Inspector. I shall listen and perhaps ask a question or two." Japp grunted. "Just don't slow me down with your fancy ideas." We started with Clara. She sat across from Japp, twisting a handkerchief. Not one with a green thread, I noticed. Her voice was soft, shaky. "I loved my father," she said. "We fought, yes, but I'd never hurt him." Japp scribbled. "What was the fight about?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flicking to Poirot. "Money. He thought I was reckless, said I wasn't ready for my inheritance. Last night he said he might change his will." Japp raised an eyebrow. "Change it how?" "I don't know." Her voice broke. "He was angry. I wanted to talk to him this morning, to make things right, but then I found him." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, this handkerchief you hold, do you have others like it? With a C, perhaps?" She blinked, confused. "Yes, I have a few. They were mother's. Why?" Poirot nodded, saying nothing more. Japp moved on. "Where were you last night after dinner?" "With Edward in the garden," she said. "We walked till nearly 11, then went to bed, ishly." "Saw you?" Japp asked. She shook her head. "It was dark. We were alone." Japp wrote that down, his face hard. I could tell he didn't like her story. Too easy, no witnesses. Poirot just watched, his fingers brushing the pocket where he kept those strange handkerchiefs with the green threads. Next was Edward Marlowe. He sat down, his lanky frame hunched, his hands fidgeting. "I didn't do anything," he said before Japp even asked. "Clara's all I care about." Japp leaned back. "You're in debt, Mr. Marlowe." "Oh, a lot from what I hear. Sir Reginald's money would help, wouldn't it?" Edward's face went red. "I'd never kill for money. I loved Clara, not her father's fortune." Poirot tilted his head. Monsieur, you are an artist, yes? You travel for your work, perhaps to France. Edward frowned. France? No, never. I barely leave London. Why? Poirot smiled faintly. A small matter. And last night you were with Mademoiselle Clara. Yes, in the garden, Edward said, his voice firm. We talked about our future. Japp snorted. Convenient. No one seeing you two. We'll check that. Edward looked ready to argue, but Japp waved him out. I whispered to Poirot. He's nervous, but he doesn't seem like a killer. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Nervousness, Hastings, is not guilt, but it is interesting. Mr. Langley came next, stomping in like he owned the place. His red face was redder now, his tie still crooked. This is nonsense, he snapped. Reginald was my partner. Why would I kill him? Japp didn't flinch. Heard you two argued. Bad deal, lost money. That true? Langley's jaw tightened. Business is business. We had disagreements. Sure, he wanted to pull out of a shipyard deal. I didn't. But murder? Ridiculous. Poirot spoke softly. Monsieur Langley, you travel often, yes? To Europe, perhaps. Langley blinked, caught off guard. Yes, for business. France, Germany, all over. What's that got to do with anything? A detail, Poirot said, his voice smooth. And last night you were where? Library, Langley said, reading till midnight. Alone. Japp scribbled, clearly not happy with another solo alibi. Nobody saw you? It was late, Langley growled. People were in bed. As Langley left, I leaned toward Poirot. He's got a temper. Think he did it? Poirot shrugged. A temper, yes. A motive, perhaps. But the truth, it lies elsewhere. Miss Vivian Leroux swept in, her red dress gone, replaced by a black one, like she was already mourning. She sat with a dramatic sigh, her eyes fluttering. Poor Reggie, she said. Such a terrible loss. Japp wasn't charmed. You knew him well, Miss Leroux. Old friends, right? She smiled sadly. More than friends once. Years ago, in London. He was special to me. Special enough to kill? Japp asked bluntly. Her hand flew to her chest. Inspector! How cruel! I'd never harm him. Poirot's voice was soft, like velvet. Mademoiselle, you have travelled, much, yes, in France, for your plays. She nodded, her eyes narrowing. Yes, Paris, many times. Why do you ask? Poirot waved a hand. A small curiosity. And last night you were where? In my room, she said. Retiring early. I was tired. Japp wrote it down, his face sceptical. Alone, I suppose? Of course, she said, her voice sharp. An actress needs her rest. She left, her head high. But I caught a flicker of worry in her eyes. Poirot noticed too, I was sure. Dr. Hartley was next, sitting stiffly, his glasses glinting in the firelight. I don't know much, he said. I examined the body. Cyanide. I'm certain. Japp leaned forward. You're a doctor. Got cyanide in that bag of yours. Hartley's face went pale. Yes, but it's locked always. I'd know if someone took it. Poirot tilted his head. You treated Sir Reginald, yes? For his heart? Hartley nodded. Pills to steady it. He was under strain, business and family. And last night? Japp asked. Billiard room, Hartley said. Played alone till 11, then bed. Japp sighed. Another one with no witnesses. Convenient. hardly left, his shoulders tense. I whispered to Poirot, "He's got access to poison. That's bad, right?" Poirot's moustache twitched. Access, yes, but motive, we shall see. Last was Graves, the butler. He stood straight, his grey hair neat, his face blank. "I saw Sir Reginald to his study at 10, he said. "He asked not to be disturbed." Japp frowned. "You hear anything odd? Arguments?" Graves paused just a second. "I heard raised voices earlier, sir. Sir Reginald and Miss Clara in the hall. Something about the will." Clara, who'd been listening outside, gasped. "That's private." Japp turned to her. "Anything else, Graves?" "No, sir," Graves said. "I locked the house and retired." Poirot spoke up. "Monsieur Graves, you have served here long?" 10 years, Graves said, "and before in other houses, some in France." Poirot's eyes lit up, but he only nodded. "Merci, that is all." As Graves left, Japp threw up his hands. "Nobody saw nothing. Nobody heard nothing. This is a mess." Poirot stood, brushing his suit. "Not a mess, Inspector. A puzzle. The pieces are here, the handkerchiefs, the green threads, the locked room. We must arrange them." I followed him to the hall, where the guests were whispering, throwing glances at each other. Clara clung to Edward. Langley paced. Miss Vivian sat fanning herself. Hartley checked his watch, and Graves watched from the shadows. The air was thick with suspicion. "Poirot," I said, "those handkerchiefs, you think they're Clara's?" He pulled one from his pocket, the blue sea catching the light, the green thread barely visible. "Perhaps Hastings, but this thread, it is not hers. It comes from elsewhere, France, I suspect. Someone wishes us to think of Clara, but the thread, it betrays them." I frowned. "So, someone's framing her." He smiled. "Or they wish us to think so. The mind of a killer, it is clever, but not as clever as Poirot." The day wore on, with Japp's men searching the house. They found no poison bottle, no hidden keys. The study's windows stayed locked, the safe unopened. Clara cried in her room, Edward hovering nearby. Langley drank too much, muttering about ruined deals. Miss Vivian told stories to anyone who'd listen, her voice too loud. Hartley kept to himself, his bag never far. Graves moved silently, always watching. By evening, Japp was frustrated. If it's murder, it's a clever one. Locked room, no weapon, no clear motives here, Inspector. Chapter 4. The Missing Will. The afternoon sun hung low over Ashbourne Hall, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death had turned the grand manor into a cage with every guest a suspect and every room a piece of the puzzle. Captain Hastings here, trying to keep up with Hercule Poirot, whose sharp eyes and sharper mind were already miles ahead of the rest of us. After the morning's interviews, Inspector Japp called everyone to the drawing-room again. The air was thick with worry, and nobody looked at each other for long. Clara Ashbourne sat on a velvet sofa, her face pale, her hands twisting a plain handkerchief. None of those strange ones with the green thread. Edward Marlowe stood behind her, his jaw tight, like he was ready to fight anyone who came too close. Mr. Langley slouched in an armchair, his face red from too much brandy. Miss Vivian LaRue perched on a chair like it was a stage, her black dress dramatic against her pale skin. Dr. Hartley stood by the window, his glasses catching the light, his medical bag at his feet. Mr. Graves, the butler, waited near the door, his face as blank as ever. Japp stood in the centre, holding a notebook, looking tired. "Right," he said, his voice rough. "We've got a problem. Sir Reginald's solicitor, Mr. Thompson, just arrived. Says the will's missing." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Missing? What do you mean?" Thompson, a thin man with a pinched face and a briefcase, stepped forward. "I saw Sir Reginald last week. He kept his will in the study safe. I checked this morning. It's gone." The room erupted. Langley jumped up, shouting, "Gone? That's his fortune! Who took it?" Edward gripped Clara's shoulder, his eyes wide. Miss Vivian fanned herself, muttering, "Oh, how awful!" Dr. Hartley frowned, saying nothing. Graves stayed still, but I caught a flicker in his eyes, quick as a blink. Poirot, sitting in a high-backed chair, raised a hand for silence. "Monsieur Thompson, this will, it was important, yes? Who stood to gain?" Thompson adjusted his tie, nervous. Clara was the main heir. Sir Reginald left her most of his estate, millions, the house, the business. Smaller sums went to charities, and a few gifts to old friends. He glanced at Miss Vivian, who looked away. Clara shook her head. "I didn't know. Father never told me details. We fought about money, but I didn't care about the will." Langley snorted. "Didn't care? You're set to be rich, girl. Convenient, him dying now." Edward stepped forward, fists clenched. "Watch your mouth, Langley. Clara loved him." Japp cut in. "Enough! Thompson, when did you last see the will?" "Last week," Thompson said. "Sir Reginald said he might update it, wanted to meet this weekend to discuss." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Update, you say? To change what?" Thompson hesitated. "He didn't say. Just that he was rethinking things." The room went quiet. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Rethinking? Because of me?" Poirot turned to Japp. "Inspector, the safe in the study. It was locked, yes." Japp nodded. "Tight as a drum. Only Sir Reginald knew the combination, according to Graves." Graves bowed slightly. "Correct, sir. I never touched it." Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room. "Then we must open this safe. The will, it may still be there, or its absence tells us much." Japp sighed. "We'll need a locksmith. Could take hours." Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps not, Inspector. Hastings come. Let us visit the study." I followed Poirot, Japp and Thompson to the study, leaving the others whispering. The room was as we'd left it. Dark wood, leather chairs, the desk where Sir Reginald died. The brandy glass was gone, sent for testing, but the bitter almond smell lingered. The safe, a heavy iron box, sat in the corner, its dial gleaming. Poirot knelt by it, his fingers brushing the metal. A fine safe, but not impossible. "Monsieur Thompson, you know Sir Reginald's habits. Did he use numbers special to him?" Thompson frowned. "He mentioned his wife's birthday once, May 12th, 1880. Poirot spun the dial, 5 to 12:80. Nothing. He tried Clara's birthday, which Thompson gave as July 3rd, 1905. Still nothing. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Interesting. The man, he guards his secrets well." Japp crossed his arms. "We'll get that locksmith." No use guessing. Poirot stood, his eyes scanning the room. That's when he stopped, his gaze fixed on the floor near the desk. Hastings, regardez. Another clue, perhaps. He bent down, picking up a tiny scrap of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp. It was torn with a single word, will. I stared. Part of the will. Poirot shook his head. No, too small. A note, perhaps, or a trick. He slipped it into his pocket, next to the handkerchiefs with those green threads. Japp groaned. More of your bits and bobs, Poirot. Stick to the big stuff. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The big stuff, Inspector, is made of small things, like this thread. He pulled out one of the handkerchiefs, the blue sea clear, the green thread, catching the light. This, it does not belong here. It is foreign, not English. I suspect France. Japp rolled his eyes. A thread. You're chasing shadows. I wasn't so sure. Poirot, you keep saying that thread's special. Why? He smiled. It is a stranger, Hastings. This house, it is all English linen, English wool. But this green thread, it is different. Silk, perhaps, from a place far away. It points to someone who has travelled. Back in the drawing room, Japp sent for the locksmith and told everyone to stay put. The guests scattered, but the tension stayed. Clara went to her room, Edward trailing her. Langley stormed off to the library, muttering about delays. Miss Vivian lingered, chatting with a constable, her voice sweet, but her eyes sharp. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his fingers tapping, his medical bag. Graves moved silently, clearing cups, but I saw him glance at Poirot like he was measuring him. I caught up with Poirot in the hall. That will, I said. If it's gone, someone took it. But who? He tapped his temple. The little grey. Cells, they work, Hastings. The will is a motive, money, power. Clara gains most, but others may lose. Langley, perhaps, or Miss Vivian, who knew Sir Reginald long ago. And the handkerchiefs, I asked. Clara's? He held up the one from the study. The C says Clara, yes, but the green thread says no. Someone wishes us to think of her, to point the finger. A frame, perhaps. I frowned. So, the killer planted them. Poirot nodded. Or they dropped one by mistake and added another to confuse. The thread, it is the truth they cannot hide. The locksmith arrived by evening, a wiry man with tools clanking in a bag. We gathered in the study as he worked on the safe. Clara stood by, biting her lip. Edward whispered to her, his face pale. Langley watched, arms crossed, like he expected gold to spill out. Miss Vivian stayed back, her fan fluttering. Dr. Hartley and Graves stood near the door, silent. The safe clicked open. Thompson rushed forward, pulling out papers, deeds, contracts, but no will. "It's gone," he said, his voice flat. "It was here last week." Clara swayed, and Edward caught her. "Why would someone take it?" she whispered. Langley laughed, bitterly. "To get the money, girl, or to stop you from getting it." Japp turned to the group. "Anyone know anything about this?" Head shook, eyes darted. Nobody spoke. Poirot watched, his face calm, but his mind racing, I could tell. He slipped the handkerchief back into his pocket, his fingers brushing that green thread. As night fell, Japp set constables to guard the study. The guests went to dinner, but nobody ate much. Clara stared at her plate. Edward tried to cheer her. Langley drank, his voice loud, accusing everyone. Miss Vivian told a story about a play, but it fell flat. Dr. Hartley was quiet, his eyes on Clara. Graves served, his face unreadable. Poirot leaned close to me. The will? It is a shadow. Hastings, the real clue is the thread. It speaks of someone who has been to France. Miss Vivian, Langley, perhaps Graves. We must find its source. I nodded, but my head spun. A missing will, a locked room, cyanide, and those strange handkerchiefs. The killer was playing a game, and only Poirot saw the rules. As the fire burned low, I felt the weight of Ashbourne, Hall's secrets, and that green thread, so small, was the only light guiding us to the truth. Chapter 5. A Tangled Web of Motives. The next morning at Ashbourne Hall felt colder, as if the house itself mourned Sir Reginald Ashbourne. The sky outside was grey, heavy with clouds, and the grand rooms seemed dim, their shine dulled by the weight of death. Breakfast was a quiet affair, with only the clink of cups and the rustle of napkins breaking the silence. Clara Ashbourne sat with her head down, picking at a piece of toast. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, kept close, his eyes worried. Mr. Langley slouched in his chair, nursing a headache from last night's brandy. Miss Vivian Larue, draped in a dark shawl, sipped tea with a faraway look. Dr. Hartley ate slowly, his glasses fogged from the steam of his coffee. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved like a ghost, serving without a word. Captain Hastings sat across from Hercule Poirot, who looked as sharp as ever. His suit was spotless, his moustache neat, but his eyes were busy, darting from face to face. He hadn't touched his food, just held a small cup of coffee, watching the others like a cat watching mice. I knew that look. His little grey cells were spinning, tying together threads only he could see. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads, the missing will, the locked study, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was already ahead of the rest of us. Inspector Japp was out with his constables, searching the grounds for clues, but he'd left word he'd be back soon. The guests were told to stay in the house, which made everyone restless. I decided to poke around, see what I could learn. Poirot didn't stop me. He just gave a small nod, like he knew I'd find something useful, even if I didn't know what. I started in the library, a big room with tall shelves and a musty smell. Langley was there, slumped in an armchair, newspaper open but unread. I pretended to browse a shelf, keeping an eye on him. "Rough day, Mr. Langley?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He grunted, rubbing his temples. "Rough? It's a nightmare. Reginald dead, the will gone, and now we're all suspects. Ridiculous." I nodded, picking up a book. "Heard you and Sir Reginald had a falling out. Business trouble?" His eyes narrowed. "Who told you that? Nosy, aren't you?" "Yes, we argued. He wanted to ditch a shipyard deal. Would have cost me a fortune, but I didn't kill him." His voice was sharp, defensive. I changed tack. "You travel a lot, right? France, maybe?" Langley frowned. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Yes, France, Germany, all over. Business doesn't wait." I let it drop, but his quick temper stuck with me. I left the library and wandered to the drawing-room, where Miss Vivian was sitting by the fire, knitting something lacy. She looked up, her smile tight. Captain Hastings, keeping busy?" "Just stretching my legs," I said. "You knew Sir Reginald a long time, didn't you?" Her needles paused. "Oh, years. We were close, back in London. He was charming then, before money made him hard." "Sounds like you missed him," I said, watching her face. She sighed, her eyes distant. "I missed the man he was, but people change." She went back to knitting, her fingers quick, like she wanted to end the talk. I moved on, heading upstairs. In the hall, I overheard voices, Clara and Edward, behind a half-open door. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their words carried. "He can't keep us apart," Clara said, her voice low. "Not now." Edward sounded tense. "Clara, we need to be careful. People are watching." I stepped away, my mind racing. Who was he? Sir Reginald? Or someone else? I found Dr. Hartley in the billiard room, polishing his cue, his medical bag on a chair. "Mind if I join?" I asked. He glanced up, surprised. "Not much for games today, Captain. Too much on my mind." "Fair enough," I said, leaning on. "The table." "You treated Sir Reginald's heart, right? Must have known him well." He nodded, his face guarded. "Well enough. He was stubborn, ignored my advice. Too much stress, business, family." "Family?" I pressed. "Clara, you mean?" His eyes flicked to his bag, then back. "Yes, they fought. She's young, headstrong. He worried about her choices." I left it there, but his quick glance at the bag made me wonder. Cyanide came from somewhere. Could it be his? I headed back to Poirot, who was in the garden staring at the rose bushes like they held secrets. "Hastings," he said, not looking up. "You have been busy. What have you learned?" I told him everything. Langley's money troubles, miss. Vivien's past with Sir Reginald, Clara, and Edward's secret talk. Hartley's guarded answers. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his fingers brushing the pocket where he kept the handkerchiefs. "Good work, mon ami," he said. "You paint a picture, a web of motives, greed, love, revenge. But the thread, it is the key." I frowned. "You keep saying that. What's so special about that green thread?" He pulled out one of the handkerchiefs, the blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. "This, Hastings, is not English. I sent a sample to a friend, a textile man in London. He says it is silk, rare, from a French workshop. Not sold here. So, someone brought it from France?" I asked. "Oui," he said. "Miss Vivienne, she played in Paris. Langley, he travels there. Graves, he worked there. The thread, it narrows our path." I nodded, but it still felt like a stretch. A thread? Against a missing will and a locked-room murder? But Poirot's eyes were bright, certain. Japp returned at noon, his face grim. "Grounds are clean," he said, joining us in the drawing-room. "No poison bottles, no footprints. The brandy glass tested positive for cyanide, though, mixed in the drink." Poirot nodded. "And the safe? Any news?" "Locksmith says it wasn't tampered with," Japp said. "If the will was taken, it was before the door was locked. Clara, who'd just walked in, overheard." "Before? But father locked it himself. Graves saw him." Graves, standing nearby, nodded. "Yes, miss. He went in at 10, locked the door. I heard the click." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet the will is gone. The poison was given. The handkerchief was left. A clever mind is at work." Japp sighed. "I'm sticking with suicide for now. No bottle, no syringe. Maybe he hid it." Poirot shook his head. "No, Inspector. No man drinks cyanide and hides the bottle so well. This is murder, and the handkerchief, it points to the killer." I glanced at the guests now gathered again. Clara clung to Edward, her eyes scared. Langley paced, muttering about delays. Miss Vivian sat straight, her shawl tight around her. Hartley adjusted his glasses, his bag close. Graves watched, silent as stone. "Poirot," I whispered. "If it's murder, who had the chance?" The door was locked. He smiled faintly. "The lock, it is not so secure as we think. I examined it. Old, loose. A skilled hand could open it, then lock it again." I stared. "So, anyone could have gone in?" "Oui," he said, "but only one left the handkerchief, and that thread, it tells us who." Dinner that night was tense. Nobody talked much, just pushed food around their plates. Clara barely ate, her eyes on the table. Edward tried to cheer her, but his jokes fell flat. Langley drank too much, his voice loud, accusing Japp of dragging his feet. Miss Vivian told a quiet story about a play, but nobody listened. Hartley ate slowly, his eyes flicking to Clara. Graves served, his face blank, but I caught him watching Poirot again. After dinner, Poirot pulled me aside. "Hastings, the motives, they tangle like vines. Langley wants money. Miss Vivian, perhaps revenge for old wounds. Clara, the inheritance. Edward, to protect her. Hartley, something hidden. Graves, a secret past. But the thread, it cuts through. The tangle." I nodded, my head spinning. The missing will, the cyanide, the locked room, those handkerchiefs, it was too much. But Poirot was calm, certain, holding that green thread like it was a map to the truth. As the night closed in, Ashbourne Hall felt darker, its secrets heavier. The killer was here, watching, waiting. And only Poirot, with his little grey cells and that strange green thread, could catch them. Chapter 6. The Alibi Puzzle. The third day at Ashbourne Hall dawned with a chill that seeped into the bones. The grand house, once warm with candlelight and chatter, now felt like a maze of shadows. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder hung over us like a storm cloud, and every guest seemed to carry a secret in their eyes. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the dining room, watching the others over a cup of tea gone cold. Clara Ashbourne stared out a window, her face pale as milk. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, hovered nearby, his hands fidgeting. Mr. Langley slouched at the table, muttering into his coffee. Miss Vivian Leroux, wrapped in a dark shawl, picked at a scone, her eyes distant. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag on the floor, his glasses glinting. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved silently, clearing plates with a face like stone. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache neat. He sipped his tiny coffee, but his eyes never stopped, moving, catching every glance, every twitch. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were still in his pocket, and I knew he was thinking about them, turning them over in his mind like keys to a locked door. The missing will, the cyanide, the locked study. It was all a puzzle, and Poirot was piecing it together, one small clue at a time. Inspector Japp burst in, his coat damp from the morning mist. "Right," he said, his voice sharp. "We're checking alibis again. Too many of you were alone last night. Time to dig deeper." Clara turned, her eyes wide. "You think we're lying?" Japp shrugged. "Someone's not telling the, truth, Miss Ashbourne. Your father was poisoned in a locked room. Nobody saw nothing. Hard to believe." Edward stepped forward, his face red. "We told you. Clara and I were in the garden. Together." Japp raised an eyebrow. "And nobody saw you. Convenient." Poirot stood, his small frame calm but commanding. "Inspector, let us test these alibis with method. Each person, their story, their movements. The truth, it hides in the gaps." Japp sighed but nodded. "Fine, Poirot. Let's do it your way. Drawing room now." We gathered in the drawing room, the fire crackling but doing little to warm the mood. Japp sat at a table, notebook open, pencil ready. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his hands behind his back, watching like a hawk. I sat nearby, trying to keep up, but my head was already spinning from all the lies and half-truths. Clara went first, sitting stiffly, her hands clasped. "Edward and I were in the garden," she said, "from after dinner, around 9, until nearly 11. We walked by the roses, talked about us." Japp scribbled. "What about?" She blushed. "Our future. Father didn't like Edward. He thought he wasn't good enough." Edward, standing by the door, flinched. Japp noticed. "So, Sir Reginald didn't approve. That must have stung." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I loved father, but he was stubborn. I didn't care. About his money." Poirot spoke softly. "Mademoiselle, you walked in the dark, yes? Did you see anyone? A light? A shadow?" She shook her head. "No. It was quiet. Just us." Japp leaned forward. "And you didn't go near the study?" "No," she said, her voice sharp. "I wanted to talk to father, but not then. I was going to wait till morning." Poirot nodded, his eyes on her hands. "Your handkerchief, mademoiselle. You have others with a C." She frowned. "Yes, a few. Why do you keep asking?" He smiled faintly. "A detail, nothing more." Edward was next, sitting heavily, his hands restless. "I told you I was with Clara. We didn't see anyone, didn't hear anything." Japp frowned. "You're in debt, Marlowe. Sir Reginald's death means Clara gets the money. Helps you out, doesn't it?" Edward's jaw tightened. I'd never hurt her father. I love her. Poirot tilted his head. "Monsieur, you are an artist. You paint, yes? Do you use fine tools, perhaps a small knife for cutting canvas?" Edward blinked, confused. "Yes, a palette knife. Why?" Poirot waved a hand. "Curiosity. And this knife, it is with you?" "In my room," Edward said. "Haven't touched it in days." Wrote that down, his eyes narrow. I whispered to Poirot, "A knife? There was no stabbing." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Not for stabbing, Hastings. For a lock, perhaps." Langley came next, stomping in, his face redder than usual. "This is a waste of time," he snapped. "I was in the library reading till midnight. Alone." Japp leaned back. "You and Sir Reginald argued. He was pulling out of a deal. Cost you money, didn't it?" Langley's fists clenched. "Business isn't murder. I'd have talked him round." Poirot spoke softly. "Monsieur, you travel to France often. Do you buy fine things there? Fabrics, perhaps?" Langley stared. "Fabrics? What are you on about?" I buy contracts, not curtains." Poirot nodded, his eyes bright. "And in the library you saw no one?" "Nobody," Langley said. "House was quiet." Miss Vivian swept in, her shawl trailing like a stage curtain. She sat with a sigh, her eyes fluttering. "Such a dreadful business," she said. "I was in my room, resting. An actress needs her beauty sleep." Japp snorted. "You and Sir Reginald were close once. Any bad blood?" She smiled sadly. "We parted years ago. No hard feelings, just memories." Poirot leaned forward. "Mademoiselle, your time in Paris. You wore fine costumes, yes? Silk, perhaps?" Her eyes narrowed, just a flicker. "Of course. The best theatres, the best dresses. Why?" Poirot waved a hand. "A small matter. You heard nothing last night?" "Nothing," she said, her voice smooth. "I slept soundly." Dr. Hartley was next, sitting straight, his glasses glinting. "I played billiards till 11, then went to bed," he said. "Didn't see or hear anything." Japp tapped his pencil. "You had cyanide in your bag, Doctor. Easy to slip some in a drink." Hartley's face tightened. "My bag is locked. I'd know if it was opened." Poirot tilted his head. "You treated Sir Reginald. Did he take pills with his brandy?" Hartley nodded. "Sometimes, to calm his heart." "Why?" Poirot smiled. "A thought. And your bag, it was with you in the billiard room?" "Yes," Hartley said. "Never out of my sight." Graves came last, standing tall, his grey hair neat. "I saw Sir Reginald to his study at 10, he said. "Locked the house, went to my quarters." Japp frowned. "You heard him arguing with Clara earlier. Anything else?" Graves paused, his eyes steady. "No, sir. The house was quiet after that." Poirot spoke softly. "Monsieur Graves, you worked in France, yes? Did you bring back mementos? A fine cloth, perhaps?" Graves blinked, surprised. "I kept nothing from France, sir. Just memories." Poirot nodded, but I saw the spark in his eyes. As Graves left, Japp threw up his hands. "Every alibi's shaky. Nobody saw anybody. Nobody heard anything. It's like they're all hiding something." Poirot walked to the fireplace, his fingers brushing the pocket with the handkerchiefs. "They hide, yes, Inspector, but the truth, it leaks through. The alibis, they are a puzzle, but the green thread, it is the key." I followed him to the study, where he wanted to check the lock again. The room was sealed, but a constable let us in. Poirot knelt by the door, his fingers tracing the lock. "Hastings," he said, "this lock, it is old. A pin, a knife, could open it. Not a true locked room." I stared. "So, anyone could have got in?" "Oui," he said. "The killer. They want us to think it impossible." But they left the handkerchief with its green thread. "A mistake, perhaps, or a trick," I frowned. "Clara's handkerchiefs?" He pulled one out, the blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. "The sea says Clara, but the thread says no. It is silk, from France. Someone brought it here, someone who knows its meaning." Dinner was grim, the guests barely speaking. Clara pushed her food around, Edward whispering to her. Langley drank, his eyes angry. Miss Vivian hummed a tune, but it felt forced. Hartley ate quietly, his bag close. Graves served, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. After, Poirot pulled me aside. "Hastings, the alibis, they are weak, but the thread, it points. Miss Vivian, Langley, Graves, they know France. The killer is one of them, and the thread will tell us who." I nodded, my head full of questions. The alibis were a mess, the will was gone, the cyanide a mystery. But that green thread, so small, was Poirot's guide, and I trusted him to follow it. Ashbourne Hall was a house of lies, and the truth was hiding, waiting for Poirot's little grey cells to find it. Chapter 7. The Green Thread. The fourth day at Ashbourne Hall brought a restless energy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The grand house, with its tall windows and polished floors, felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder was a shadow over us all, and the guests moved like pieces on a chessboard, each hiding their next play. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the morning-room, watching the others through the haze of my tea's steam. Clara Ashbourne sat by a window, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the grey sky. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, stood close, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his face tight with worry. Mr. Langley sprawled in a chair, his tie loose, a glass of brandy already in hand despite the early hour. Miss Vivian Leroux, dressed in sombre grey, leafed through a magazine, her fingers quick and nervous. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses fogged from his coffee. Mr. Graves, the butler, glided in with a tray, his face as unreadable as ever. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He held a letter just arrived from London, and his eyes were bright with that spark I knew so well. His little grey cells were at work. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were still in his pocket, and I could tell they were on his mind. The missing will, the cyanide, the locked study. It was all a tangled knot, but Poirot was pulling at the right thread, I was sure. Inspector Japp stormed in, his coat damp from the drizzle outside. "Morning," he growled, shaking water from his hat. "Got news from the coroner. Cyanide, no doubt, in the brandy. But still no bottle or syringe. It's a blasted mystery." Clara's head snapped up. "No bottle? Then how?" Japp shrugged. "That's what we're here to find out, Miss Ashbourne. Someone got that poison in his glass, and I'm betting it was one of you." Edward bristled. "That's unfair. Clara's grieving, and you're pointing fingers." Japp held up a hand. "Calm down, lad. Everyone's a suspect till we say otherwise." Poirot folded his letter, slipping it into his pocket. "Inspector, may I share a small discovery? My friend in London, a textile expert, has written about our clue." He pulled out one of the handkerchiefs, the blue sea clear, the green thread catching the light. "This thread, it is silk, from a rare French fabric, made in a small workshop in Paris, not sold in England. It is used in fine costumes or linens for those with money and taste." Japp frowned. "A thread? Poirot, we're chasing a killer, not a tailor." I leaned forward. "But it's not Clara's, right? She's never been to France." Clara nodded, her voice soft. "Never. Those handkerchiefs were mother's, but they're plain linen, no fancy threads." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Exactement, Hastings. This thread, it is a stranger here. It points to someone who has been to France. Miss Vivienne, Monsieur Langley, perhaps Monsieur Graves?" Miss Vivienne looked up, her magazine dropping. "Me? Because I played in Paris? That's absurd." Langley snorted. "And I'm a businessman, not a seamstress. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot." Graves, setting down a tray, spoke calmly. "I worked in France years ago, sir, but I brought back no such fabric." Japp threw up his hands. "Enough about threads. Let's focus on the poison. Hartley, your bag had cyanide. Anyone could have nicked it." Dr. Hartley adjusted his glasses, his face pale. "Impossible. It's locked always. I check it daily." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, Doctor, the cyanide is gone. Tell me, these pills you gave Sir Reginald, for his heart, yes, could they hide the taste of poison?" Hartley frowned. "Maybe. They're bitter, like cyanide. Mixed in brandy, he might not notice." Japp scribbled that down, his eyes narrow. "So, someone knew his habits, got the poison, slipped it in his drink. But how'd they get in that locked room?" Poirot walked to the window, his hands behind his back. "The lock, Inspector. It is the heart of this puzzle. I have studied it. Old, worn, not so secure. A thin tool, a knife, a pin, could open it, then lock it again." I stared. "So, it's not a locked room at all." He nodded. "Not truly. The killer wishes us to think it impossible, but it is a trick. And this thread," he held up the handkerchief again, "it is their mistake." Japp sighed. "Fine. Poirot, let's check that lock again. And I want everyone's rooms searched. Maybe that will's hidden somewhere." We headed to the study, Japp leading the way, Poirot and I behind. The room was as we'd left it. Dark wood, heavy desk, the safe still open but empty of the will. The broken lock on the door hung loose, and Poirot knelt to examine it again. "See, Hastings," he said, pointing to the mechanism. "Scratches, small but fresh. Someone tampered with it." Japp squinted. "Could be old. This house is ancient." Poirot shook his head. "No, these are new." The killer entered, poisoned the brandy, left the handkerchief, locked the door again. Clever, but not perfect. Back in the drawing room, Japp ordered his constables to search the guests' rooms. Clara protested, her voice sharp. "You're treating us like criminals." Japp was firm. "Got to, miss. A will doesn't vanish on its own." The searches took hours. Clara's room had letters from Edward, full of love, but nothing about the will. Edward's had paintbrushes, a small knife for cutting canvas, but no poison or papers. Langley's was a mess of business contracts, some showing losses, but no will. Miss Vivienne's had old playbills from Paris, a silk scarf, but nothing suspicious. Hartley's had medical books and his locked bag, which he opened. No cyanide missing, he claimed. Graves' quarters were sparse, just a few books, no French fabrics. Japp was frustrated. "Nothing, no will, no poison. This case is a dead end." Poirot smiled faintly. "Not so, Inspector. The thread it lives. It tells us the killer has ties to France, and they left it by mistake, or to point at Clara." I frowned. Why leave it at all? If it's so special, why not take it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, Hastings, they thought it would not be noticed. A handkerchief with a C, it screams Clara. But the thread, it whispers the truth. They did not expect Poirot." Dinner was tense, the guests barely speaking. Clara pushed her soup away, Edward whispering to her. Langley drank heavily, muttering about ruined deals. Miss Vivian told a story about a Paris theatre, but her voice shook. Hartley ate quietly. his bag never far. Graves served, his eyes catching Poirot's for a moment too long. After, Poirot pulled me to the garden. The air was cool, the roses drooping under the drizzle. "Hastings," he said, "the thread is our guide. Miss Vivienne, her Paris days. She wore fine costumes. Langley, his travels. He could have bought such silk. Graves, his past in France. He knows more than he says," I nodded. "But how do we prove it?" He held up the handkerchief, the green thread glinting in the moonlight. "We follow this. It will lead us to the killer, mon ami." The house was quiet that night, but sleep didn't come easy. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, those green threads. It was a web, and Poirot was pulling it apart. The killer was here, watching, and that tiny thread was the only clue to their name. Ashbourne Hall held its secrets tight, but Poirot's little grey cells were sharper, and I knew he'd find the truth. Chapter 8. A Hidden Roman. The 5th day at Ashbourne Hall felt like a trap snapping shut. The grand house, with its polished wood and gleaming chandeliers, seemed to mock us with its beauty, hiding the ugliness of murder. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death was a wound that wouldn't heal, and every guest carried a shadow of guilt. I, Captain Hastings, wandered the halls, my mind heavy with questions. The missing will, the cyanide, the locked study, those handkerchiefs with their strange green threads. Each clue was a piece of a puzzle only Hercule Poirot could solve. Breakfast was a grim affair. The dining room quiet, except for the clink of spoons and the shuffle of feet. Clara Ashbourne sat at the table's end, her eyes red, her hands clutching a cup of tea she didn't drink. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, sat beside her, his face pale, his fingers drumming nervously. Mr. Langley slouched across from them, his eyes bleary from too much brandy the night before. Miss Vivienne Leroux, in a dark velvet dress, nibbled a piece of toast, her gaze distant. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag on the floor, his glasses fogged from his coffee. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved like a shadow, serving with a face that gave nothing away. Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He sipped his tiny coffee, but his eyes were alive, darting from one guest to another. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew he was thinking about them, turning them over in his mind like a key to a locked door. The letter from his textile friend in London had confirmed the thread was French silk, rare and fine, pointing to someone with ties to Paris, Miss Vivienne, Langley, or Graves. Inspector Japp stormed in, his coat damp from the morning rain. "Morning," he said, his voice rough. "Still no sign of that will, but the coroner's report is final. Cyanide in the brandy, no doubt. We're checking everyone's belongings again." Clara's head snapped up. "Again? You've already searched our rooms." Japp shrugged. "Got to be thorough, Miss Ashbourne. Someone's hiding something." Edward clenched his fists. "This is harassment. Clara's done nothing." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. "Peace, Monsieur Edward. The inspector seeks the truth, as do I. But truth, it hides in the small things." He patted his pocket, where the handkerchief sat. Japp frowned. "You and your small things, Poirot. I'm more interested in who had access to that brandy." I decided to stretch my legs, see what I could pick up. Poirot gave me a nod, like he knew I'd stumble on something useful. I wandered toward the garden, hoping for fresh air, but stopped when I heard voices from a small sitting room. The door was ajar, and I caught Clara's voice, low and urgent. "James, we can't keep this up. Not now." James? That was Dr. Hartley. I peered through the crack and saw them. Clara standing close to Hartley, her hand on his arm. He looked tense, his glasses pushed up, his voice soft. "Clara, we have to be careful. If Edward finds out," my heart jumped. Clara and Hartley? What about Edward? I backed away, my head spinning. Was Clara cheating on her fiancé? Did Edward know? I hurried to find Poirot, who was in the library, reading his textile letter again. "Hastings," he said, not looking up. "You have the face of a man with news. Speak." I told him what I'd heard. Clara and Hartley, their secret talk, the way they stood too close. Poirot's eyes lit up. "A romance? Hidden? This is most interesting, mon ami. It changes the picture. How?" I asked. "Does it make Hartley the killer?" Poirot shook his head, pulling out a handkerchief with the green thread. "Not yet. But love, it is a powerful motive. If Edward knew, perhaps he acted in jealousy. Or Hartley to protect Clara. Or Clara herself to free herself from her father's control." I frowned. "But the handkerchiefs, aren't they the key?" "Oui," he said, holding up the cloth. The blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. "This thread, it points to France. But now we see a new thread, love. We must question Mademoiselle Clara." We found Clara in the drawing-room, alone, staring at a photograph of her father. She jumped when we entered, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, what do you want?" Poirot sat, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, you are troubled. Your father's death, it is heavy, yes, but there is more. You and Dr. Hartley, you are close." Her eyes widened and she blushed. "What? No, we're just friends." Poirot tilted his head. "Friends do not speak so softly, so secretly. Tell Poirot the truth. It may save you." She bit her lip, tears welling. "All right, I love James, Dr. Hartley. Father didn't know. He wanted me to marry Edward. Said James wasn't good enough. But I couldn't tell Edward. It would break him." I stared. "You're engaged to Edward, but love Hartley." She nodded, her voice small. "I care for Edward, but James, he understands me. We've been careful, meeting in secret. Father was so controlling." Poirot nodded, his eyes kind but sharp. "And these handkerchiefs with the sea, they are yours." "Yes," she said, "but they're old, from Mother. I've never seen one with a green thread." Poirot held up the handkerchief, the thread catching the light. "This thread, it is not yours. It is French silk, rare. You have not been to France?" "Never," she said, shaking her head. "I swear." Poirot stood, bowing slightly. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you know." As we left, I whispered, "She's in love with Hartley. That's a motive for Edward, maybe." Poirot nodded. "Or for Hartley to win her, or Clara to escape her father. But the thread, it says none of them. It points elsewhere." Jap was in the hall, talking to a constable. "Rooms searched again," he said. "Nothing new. No will, no poison. But we found this in the study." He held up a small key, old and rusty, hidden under a rug. "Might fit something." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A key, Inspector. Perhaps to a drawer, a box. We must check." We returned to the study, the air still bitter with the faint smell of cyanide. The desk had drawers, but none matched the key. Poirot searched the shelves, the safe, even the floorboards, but found nothing. "This key," he said. "It is another clue, but not for now. The thread, it is still our guide." Dinner was tense, the guests barely speaking. Clara avoided Hartley's eyes, sitting close to Edward, who looked miserable. Langley drank, muttering about business. Miss Vivian told a story about a Paris play, her voice too bright. Hartley ate quietly, his bag close. Graves served, his eyes flicking to Poirot. After, Poirot pulled me to the garden. The air was damp, the roses heavy with rain. "Hastings," he said, "this romance, it is a twist. Edward, if he knows, may have killed in anger. Hartley to free Clara. But the thread, it points to France. Miss Vivian, Langley, Graves. One of them holds the truth." I nodded, my head full of questions. The hidden romance, the missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, those green threads. It was a web of lies, and Poirot was unravelling it. The killer was among us, watching, and that tiny thread was our only path to the truth. Ashbourne. Hall's secrets were deep, but Poirot's little grey cells were deeper, and I knew he'd find the answer. Chapter 9. The Poison's Source. The 6th day at Ashbourne Hall was heavy with suspicion, the grand house feeling more like a prison with each passing hour. The air was thick, the kind that makes your chest tight, as if the walls themselves knew a killer walked among us. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder was a dark cloud, and every glance between the guests carried a spark of doubt. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the morning room, my tea untouched, watching the others try to act normal. Clara Ashbourne sat by a window, her face pale, her hands twisting a plain handkerchief. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, hovered nearby, his eyes tired and worried. Mr. Langley slouched at the table, his face red from another night of drinking. Miss Vivian LaRue, in a sombre grey dress, sipped tea, her fingers trembling slightly. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses glinting in the dim light. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved silently, setting out plates with a face that hid everything. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit as neat as ever, his moustache perfectly curled. He held a small notebook, jotting something with a tiny pencil, but his eyes never left the guests. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew they were the key to his thoughts. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was close to seeing the picture. Inspector Japp burst in, his coat damp from the morning drizzle. "Big news," he said, his voice sharp. "Hartley, your bag! Cyanide's missing. Checked it myself this morning." Hartley's head snapped up, his face pale. "Impossible! It's locked always. I checked yesterday." Japp crossed his arms. "Well, it's gone now. Enough for a lethal dose. Care to explain?" The room went quiet, all eyes on Hartley. Clara gasped, her hand on her mouth. Edward glared, his fists tight. Langley snorted, muttering, "Knew it!" Miss Vivian fanned, herself, her eyes wide. Graves stood still, but I saw his jaw twitch. Hartley stood, his voice shaky. "I swear, nobody touched my bag. It's always with me." Poirot spoke softly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Doctor, this bag, it was in the billiard room the night of the murder, yes? And you played alone?" Hartley nodded, his glasses slipping. "Yes, till 11. Then I took it to my room." Poirot tilted his head. "And it was locked, you say? Always?" "Always," Hartley said, his voice firm. "I'd know if it was opened." Japp frowned. "Then how'd the cyanide get out? Someone got to it, and you're the one with the key." Clara's voice trembled. "James wouldn't—" "He couldn't." Edward turned to her, his face red. "James, you're defending him." She blushed, looking away. I remembered their secret talk, Clara and Hartley, in love, hiding it from Edward. This was getting messier by the minute. Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room. "Inspector, let us examine this bag. The poisoned source, it is the heart of this crime." We followed Hartley to his room, Japp, Poirot, and me. The bag sat on a table, black leather, scuffed but sturdy. Hartley unlocked it with a small key, his hands shaking. Inside were bottles, tools, and papers, but no cyanide vial. "It was here," he said, pointing to an empty slot. "A small glass bottle, sealed tight." Japp peered in. "No sign of tampering. You sure it was there?" "I swear," Hartley said. "I checked it 2 days ago." Poirot knelt, inspecting the bag's lock. "No scratches, no force. This lock, it is simple. A skilled hand could open it, perhaps with a pin." I frowned. "So, anyone could have taken it?" "We, Hastings," Poirot said, standing. "The bag was in the billiard room, unguarded for moments. The killer, they are clever." Japp turned to Hartley. "You're in trouble, Doctor. That cyanide came from you." Hartley's face went white. "I didn't do it. I'd never hurt Sir Reginald." Clara, who'd followed us, spoke up. "He's telling the truth. James is kind. He wouldn't—" Edward behind her cut in. "Clara, stop it. You're making it worse." The air crackled with tension. Poirot watched, his eyes sharp, missing nothing. "Monsieur Hartley," he said, "these pills you gave Sir Reginald for his heart, they were taken with brandy, yes?" Hartley nodded. "Yes, sometimes. They're bitter, could mask another taste." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And the brandy glass? It was near the desk where we found this." He pulled out a handkerchief, the blue sea clear, the green, thread glinting. "This was dropped perhaps when the killer poured the poison." Japp rolled his eyes. "That thread again. Poirot, it's just a bit of fluff." Poirot smiled faintly. "No, Inspector, it is French silk, rare, from Paris. It points to someone who has been there, Miss Vivienne, Monsieur Langley, perhaps, Monsieur Graves." Hartley stared. "I've never been to France. That's not mine." Poirot nodded. "I believe you, Doctor, but the thread, it tells a story." Back in the drawing room, Japp questioned the others about the cyanide. Langley laughed bitterly. "Not me. I don't touch poison. Too messy." Miss Vivian shook her head. "I wouldn't know cyanide from sugar. I was an actress, not a chemist." Graves spoke calmly. "I handle food and drink, sir, but no poisons. The brandy was poured from Sir Reginald's decanter. Clara whispered, "Father drank brandy every night. Someone knew that." Edward nodded. "Yeah, he always had a glass in. His study?" Japp scribbled, his face grim. "So, the killer knew his habits, got the cyanide, slipped it in the brandy. But how'd they get in that room?" Poirot walked to the window, his hands behind his back. "The lock, Inspector. It was tampered with. A thin tool could open it, and this handkerchief," he held it up, "was left near the decanter. Yeah, clue to the killer's mistake." I frowned. "You think they dropped it while pouring the poison?" "Oui, Hastings," he said. "Or they placed it to point at Mademoiselle Clara. But the green thread, it betrays them." Dinner was a quiet mess, the guests barely touching their food. Clara sat next to Edward, but her eyes flicked to Hartley, who kept his head down. Langley drank, muttering about lost deals. Miss Vivian hummed a tune, her voice shaky. Graves served, his eyes catching Poirot's for a moment too long. After, Poirot pulled me to the hall. "Hastings, the poison's source, it is clear, Hartley's bag. But the thief, they are clever. The thread points to France, to Miss Vivian, Langley, or Graves. And this romance, Clara and Hartley, it adds fire to the motive." I nodded, my head spinning. If Edward knew about them, could he have killed out of jealousy? "Perhaps," Poirot said, holding the handkerchief, the green thread glinting. "But the thread, it does not lie. It will lead us to the truth." The house grew dark, the rain tapping the windows. The cyanide, the missing will, the tampered lock, the hidden romance, those green threads. It was a web of secrets, and Poirot was pulling it apart. The killer was here, watching, and that tiny thread was our only guide. Ashbourne Hall's walls held the truth, and Poirot's little grey cells would find it. Chapter 10. A Red Herring Uncovered. The 7th day at Ashbourne Hall dawned with a grey sky that mirrored the mood inside. The grand house, with its tall ceilings and polished floors, felt like a stage where everyone played a part, hiding their true faces. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder was a heavy weight, and the guests moved carefully, as if one wrong step might betray them. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the dining room, my tea cold, watching the others pretend all was well. Clara Ashbourne sat at the table's edge, her face pale, her hands still. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, sat close, his eyes dark with worry. Mr. Langley slumped in a chair, his face flushed from brandy, a habit he couldn't shake. Miss Vivian Leroux, in a dark silk dress, sipped coffee, her fingers tapping nervously. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag nearby, his glasses hiding his thoughts. Mr. Graves, the butler, served quietly, his face a mask, but his eyes sharp. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache neat. He held a small notebook, but his eyes were on the guests, catching every glance, every fidget. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew they were. The key to his thinking, the missing will, the cyanide from Hartley's bag, the tampered lock, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was close to solving it. Inspector Japp burst in, his boots loud on the floor. "Big news," he said, his voice sharp. "We're arresting Edward Marlowe. Motives clear, debts up to his ears, and Clara's inheritance solves it all. Clara gasped, standing. No! Edward wouldn't hurt father. Edward's face went white. This is mad. I was with Clara in the garden. Japp crossed his arms. No witnesses, lad. You're in debt. Sir Reginald didn't like you, and now he's dead. Looks bad. The room buzzed. Langley laughed bitterly. Told you, boy's trouble. Miss Vivian clutched her pearls, whispering, How dreadful! Hartley adjusted his glasses, saying nothing. Graves stood still, but I saw his hands tighten. Poirot stood, his small frame calm, but firm. Inspector, you move too fast. An arrest, it must have proof. Monsieur Edward's alibi, it is weak, yes, but let us test it. Japp frowned. Test it? He's got no one to back his story, Poirot. And those debts, thousands owed to bad types in London. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Edward, why didn't you tell me? Edward looked down. I didn't want you to worry. I was handling it. Poirot tilted his head. Monsieur Edward, you were in the garden with Mademoiselle Clara, yes? From 9 to 11? Edward nodded, his voice low. Yes. We walked by the roses, talked about everything. Poirot turned to Clara. Mademoiselle, you confirm this? She nodded, her voice shaky. Yes, we were together, I swear. Japp snorted. Still no witnesses. And you, Miss Ashbourne, stand to gain millions. Maybe you're in on it. Clara swayed, and Edward caught her. Leave her alone, he snapped. Poirot raised a hand. Inspector, let us walk the garden. The ground, it may tell a story. We followed Poirot outside, Japp grumbling, Edward and Clara trailing behind. The garden was damp, the roses heavy with dew. Poirot knelt by a path near the rose bushes, his fingers brushing the dirt. See, Hastings, he said, pointing to faint marks. Footprints, 2 sets, small, like a woman's, and larger, like a man's. Fresh, from that night. Japp squinted. Could be anyone's. Poirot shook his head. Non, Inspector. The size, it fits Mademoiselle Clara and Monsieur Edward. They were here, as they say. Japp frowned, but nodded. Fine, it helps their story. But deads don't. Lie, Marlowe. You're still in my sights. Edward's shoulders sagged, but Clara clung to him, her eyes fierce. He's innocent, she said. Back in the drawing-room, Japp paced. All right, Poirot. You've bought him time, but I'm watching him. Poirot sat, pulling out a handkerchief, the blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. Inspector, this is the true clue. The debts, they are a red herring. The killer wants us to look at Edward, at Clara. But this thread, it points elsewhere. I leaned forward. You think the handkerchief was planted? Oui, Hastings, he said. The sea says Clara, but the thread says no. It is French silk, rare, from Paris. It belongs to someone who travelled. Miss Vivian, Langley, perhaps Graves. Langley, overhearing, scoffed. You're still on about that thread? It's nothing. Miss Vivian fanned herself. Really, Mr. Poirot, it's just a bit of cloth. Graves spoke softly. I've no such silk, sir. Never did. Poirot smiled faintly. One of you lies. The thread, it does not. Japp sighed. Fine, Poirot. Let's check Edward's room again. Maybe we missed something. We searched Edward's room, finding paintbrushes, a small knife for canvas, and old letters from Clara. full of love. No will, no poison, no French silk. Japp shook his head. Still looks bad for you, Marlowe. Poirot held up a hand. Inspector, the knife. This could open a lock, yes? Japp examined it. Maybe, thin enough, but that doesn't clear him. Poirot nodded. It does not, but it shows the lock was no barrier. The killer used such a tool, then left the handkerchief to point at Clara. Dinner was grim, the guests barely speaking. Clara held Edward's hand, her eyes defiant. Langley drank, muttering about delays. Miss Vivian told a story about a Paris play, her voice too bright. Hartley ate quietly, his bag close, his eyes on Clara. Graves served, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. After, Poirot pulled me to the hall. Hastings, Edward's debts, they are a distraction. The killer wants us to chase him, to miss the truth. The thread it points to France, Miss Vivian, Langley, Graves. One of them left it, by mistake or design. I nodded, my head full of doubts. But Edward's alibi holds. So who? Poirot held up the handkerchief, the green thread, glinting. This will tell us. The killer thought it small, unimportant, but to Poirot it is everything. The house grew dark, the wind howling outside. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, the hidden romance, those green threads. It was a web of lies, and Poirot was cutting through. The killer was here, watching, and that tiny thread was our guide to the truth. Ashbourne Hall's secrets were deep, but Poirot's little grey cells were deeper, and I knew he'd find the answer. Chapter 11. The Butler's Secret. The 8th day at Ashbourne Hall felt like a rope tightening around us all. The grand house, with its gleaming chandeliers and velvet curtains, was a beautiful cage, trapping us with a murderer. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death cast a long shadow, and every guest seemed to carry a lie in their eyes. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the morning room, my tea cold, watching the others try to hide their nerves. Clara Ashbourne sat by a window, her face pale, her hands still. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, stayed close, his eyes tired but fierce. Mr. Langley slumped at the table, his face red from brandy, his temper short. Miss Vivian Leroux, in a dark silk dress, sipped tea, her fingers twitching. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses hiding his thoughts. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved silently, serving with a face like stone, but his eyes sharp as knives. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He held a small notebook, but his eyes were on the guests, catching every glance, every fidget. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew they were the key to his mind. The missing will, the cyanide from Hartley's bag, the tampered lock, the hidden romance between Clara and Hartley. They were all pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was close to seeing the whole picture. Inspector Japp burst in, his coat damp from the morning rain. "Right," he said, his voice rough. "We're digging deeper. Graves, you said you heard Sir Reginald argue with Clara. Time to talk straight. What else did you hear?" Graves stood tall, his grey hair neat, his face calm. "I told you. Sir, I heard raised voices in the hall around 9. Sir Reginald and Miss Clara, about the will." Clara's head snapped up. "That's private. Why bring it up again?" Japp crossed his arms. Because it's motive, miss. Your father was changing his will, maybe cutting you out. Makes you look bad. Edward stood, his fists tight. She was with me. Stop hounding her. Poirot raised a hand, his voice soft but firm. Inspector, let us speak with Monsieur Graves alone. The details, they matter. Japp sighed but nodded. Fine, Poirot. Library now. We followed Graves to the library, a big room with tall shelves and a musty smell. Japp sat at a table, notebook open. Poirot stood by a window, his hands behind his back, watching Graves like a hawk. I stood nearby, my head spinning from all the secrets. Graves spoke first, his voice steady. I heard Sir Reginald say he was disappointed in Miss Clara. Said she wasn't ready for his money. He mentioned changing the will, giving more to charity. Japp frowned. And you didn't think to tell us this sooner? Graves' eyes flickered. I thought it private, sir. I only heard bits passing by. Poirot tilted his head. Monsieur Graves, you are loyal, yes? 10 years with Sir Reginald. But before, you worked in France, correct? Graves nodded, his face tight. Yes, sir. In Paris for a family, 5 years. Poirot pulled out a handkerchief, the blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. This thread, it is French silk, rare, from Paris. You worked there. Did you see such fabric? Graves' jaw tightened, just for a moment. No, sir, I was a butler, not a tailor. I brought back no cloth. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But you heard more that night, yes? Not just Clara. Another voice, perhaps? Graves hesitated, his hands clasping. Yes, I heard Sir Reginald, later, around 10, in his study. He was angry, speaking to someone. A man, I think. I couldn't make out the words. Japp leaned forward. Who? Langley? Hartley? Edward? Graves shook his head. I don't know, sir. The door was closed. I didn't linger. Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. Merci, Monsieur Graves. You have helped. As Graves left, Japp threw up his hands. Another dead end. Everyone's hiding something, but we've got nothing solid. Poirot smiled faintly. Not so, Inspector. Monsieur Graves, he knows more than he says. The thread, it points to France. He was there. And this argument, it points to a man. Langley, Hartley, or Edward. I frowned, but Edward was with Clara, and Hartley was in the billiard room. Poirot tapped his temple. Alibis, Hastings, they bend. The lock was tampered with. Someone entered, argued, poisoned the brandy, left the handkerchief. Graves heard it. Japp sighed. Fine, let's check the study again. Maybe we missed something. We went to the study, the air still bitter with the faint smell of cyanide. The desk was bare, the safe empty, the lock on the door broken from when we forced it open. Poirot knelt by the desk, his fingers brushing the floor. Regardez, Hastings, he said, pointing to a tiny scratch near the leg. A mark fresh. Something was moved, perhaps dropped. I squinted. The handkerchief. Perhaps, he said, pulling one out, the green thread catching the light. This was near the decanter. The killer, they poured the poison, dropped, this by mistake, or to point at Clara. Japp frowned. You think Graves is lying? He's got no motive. Poirot stood, brushing his suit. Motive, Inspector, hides in the shadows. Graves, he worked for Sir Reginald 10 years. Perhaps he knew secrets about the will, the business, and France. It links him to this thread. Back in the drawing room, Japp questioned Langley about the argument Graves heard. "Me?" Langley scoffed. "I was in the library, told you. Didn't talk to Reginald after dinner." Hartley shook his head. "Not me. I was playing billiards." Edward clenched his fists. "I was with Clara. Whoever Graves heard, it wasn't me." Clara nodded, her voice soft. "We were in the garden." Miss Vivian fanned herself. "All this arguing! I heard nothing. I was in my room." Poirot watched them, his eyes sharp. "Someone lies. The thread, it does not. It is French silk, from Paris. One of you brought it here." Dinner was tense, the guests barely eating. Clara sat close to Edward, but her eyes flicked to Hartley, who kept his head down. Langley drank, muttering about delays. Miss Vivian told a story about a Paris play, her voice shaky. Graves served, his eyes catching Poirot's again. After, Poirot pulled me to the garden. The air was cold, the roses heavy with rain. "Hastings," he said, "Graves' secret. It is small, but vital." He heard a man argue with Sir Reginald. This man, he may be the killer. And the thread it points to France, Miss Vivian, Langley, or Graves himself. I nodded, my head full of questions. But Graves, why would he kill? Poirot held up the handkerchief, the green thread glinting. Perhaps he served too long, saw too much. The thread will tell us. The house grew dark, the wind rattling, the windows. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, the hidden romance, Graves's secret, those green threads. It was a web of lies, and Poirot was unravelling it. The killer was here, watching, and that tiny thread was our guide to the truth. Ashbourne Hall held its secrets tight, but Poirot's little grey cells were sharper, and I knew he'd find the answer. Chapter 12. The Psychological Trap. The 9th day at Ashbourne Hall was like walking on a tightrope. The grand house, with its sparkling chandeliers and soft carpets, felt like a stage for a deadly play, each guest hiding their true role. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder hung heavy, and the air buzzed with suspicion. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the morning room, my tea untouched, watching the others try to act normal. Clara Ashbourne sat by a window, her face pale, her hands clutching a plain handkerchief. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, stayed close, his eyes tired but sharp. Mr. Langley slouched at the table, his face red from brandy, his temper frayed. Miss Vivian Leroux, in a dark silk dress, sipped coffee, her fingers nervous. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses hiding his thoughts. Mr. Graves, the butler, served silently, his face blank, but his eyes watchful. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He held a small notebook, but his eyes were on the guests, catching every glance, every twitch. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew they were the key to his plan. The missing will, the cyanide from Hartley's bag, the tampered lock, the hidden romance between Clara and Hartley, Graves's secret about the argument. They were all pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was ready to shake things up. Inspector Japp burst in, his coat damp from the morning mist. "Right," he said, his voice gruff. "We're no closer to the killer, but I'm keeping an eye on Marlowe. Those debts make him look bad." Clara stood, her voice sharp. "Edward's innocent. You've got no proof." Japp shrugged. "Proof's coming, miss. Someone poisoned that brandy, and I'll find out who." Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room. "Inspector, I propose a small experiment. Tonight at dinner we shall set a trap. Not with guns or locks, but with the mind, the killer. They are clever, but they fear discovery." Japp frowned. "A trap? What are you cooking up, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A game of nerves, Inspector. We shall speak of the handkerchiefs, the green threads, and watch who trembles." I leaned forward. "You're going to spook the killer?" "Oui, Hastings," he said, patting his pocket. "The thread, it is their mistake. They thought it small, but it is loud to Poirot. We shall make them feel its weight." The day dragged on, the house quiet but tense. Japp's men searched the grounds again, finding nothing new. No will, no poison bottle. Clara stayed close to Edward, whispering to him, her eyes darting to Hartley. Langley drank in the library, muttering about delays. Miss Vivian sat in the drawing-room, reading a playbill from Paris, her face tight. Hartley kept to himself, his bag never far. Graves moved through the house, his steps silent, his eyes sharp. Dinner was set for 7, and Poirot insisted everyone attend. The dining-room was grand, with a long table covered in white cloth, silver gleaming under candlelight. Clara sat, next to Edward, her hands clasped. Hartley was across from them, his eyes on his plate. Langley slouched, a glass of brandy in hand. Miss Vivian sat straight, her dress shimmering, her smile forced. Graves served, his face blank, but his movements precise. Poirot stood at the table's head, his voice clear. "Mesdames et messieurs, tonight we dine, but we also seek truth. Sir Reginald's death is no accident. It is murder, and the killer is here." The room went still, Fawkes pausing, eyes wide. Clara gasped. Edward gripped her hand. Langley snorted, but his face was pale. Miss Vivian fanned herself, her breath quick. Hartley adjusted his glasses, his hand steady. Graves froze, a tray in hand. Poirot pulled out a handkerchief, and Douai, blue sea clear, the green thread glinting in the candlelight. "This," he said, "was found in the study, near the poisoned brandy. Another was in the drawing-room the night before. They bear the mark of Mademoiselle Clara, but the thread, this green silk from Paris, it is not hers." Clara shook her head. "I told you, I've never been to France." Edward nodded. "She's telling the truth. Those aren't hers." Langley laughed, but it sounded forced. "A bit of cloth? You're chasing ghosts, Poirot." Miss Vivian's fan stopped, her eyes narrow. "Paris? I played there, but I don't carry silk handkerchiefs." Hartley spoke softly. "I've never been to France. That thread's not mine." Graves set down the tray, his voice calm. "Nor mine, sir. I left France years ago." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "One of you lies. This thread, it is rare, from a Paris workshop. It was left by mistake, or to point at Mademoiselle Clara. The killer thought it small, but to Poirot it is a shout." Miss Vivian gasped, her hand to her chest, and fainted, slumping in her chair. Hartley rushed to her, checking her pulse. "She's fine," he said, "just shock." Langley stood, his face red. "This is nonsense. You're scaring everyone over a thread." Graves helped Hartley move Miss Vivian to a sofa, his face blank but his eyes sharp. Clara clung to Edward, her voice shaky. Why would someone frame me? Poirot watched them all, his moustache twitching. The killer. They are clever. They left the handkerchief to blame Mademoiselle Clara, but the thread, it betrays them. They did not expect Poirot to notice. Japp, standing by the door, frowned. "You're stirring them up, Poirot. Got any proof?" Poirot smiled. "Proof, Inspector, comes from the heart. The killer feels the pressure now. They will slip." Dinner ended quickly, the guests scattering. Clara and Edward went to the garden, whispering. Langley stormed to the library, brandy in hand. Miss Vivian, revived, went to her room, her face pale. Hartley stayed in the dining room, his bag close, checking his notes. Graves cleared the table, his eyes on Poirot. Later, Poirot pulled me to the hall. Hastings, the trap, it worked. Miss Vivian, her feint, it was too perfect, perhaps a performance. Langley, his anger, it hides fear. Graves, his calm, it is too steady. I frowned. "You think one of them's the killer?" "Oui," he said, holding the handkerchief, the green thread glinting. "The thread points to France. Miss Vivian, Langley, Graves. Miss Vivian's feint, it is a sign. She knows the thread is dangerous." I nodded, my head spinning. "But why feint? To distract us?" "Perhaps," he said, "or to hide her fear. The killer feels the net closing. The thread, it is their mistake." The house grew dark, the candles flickering. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, the hidden romance, Graves' secret, the green threads. It was a web of lies, and Poirot's trap had shaken it. The killer was here, watching, and that tiny thread was our guide to the truth. Ashbourne Hall's secrets were cracking, and Poirot's little grey cells would break them open. Chapter 13. The Clue. Everyone missed. The 10th day at Ashbourne Hall felt like the calm before a storm. The grand house, with its polished wood and sparkling chandeliers, was a beautiful mask hiding a murderer's secret. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's death weighed heavy, and every guest moved like they were stepping on glass, afraid to break the silence. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the morning room, my tea cold, watching the others try to hide their nerves. Clara, Ashbourne, sat by a window, her face pale, her hands still. Edward Marlowe, her fiancé, stayed close, his eyes tired but fierce. Mr. Langley slouched at the table, his face red from brandy, his voice gruff. Miss Vivian Larue, in a dark silk dress, sipped coffee, her fingers trembling. Dr. Hartley sat alone, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses hiding his thoughts. Mr. Graves, the butler, served silently, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. Hercule Poirot sat across from me, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He held a small letter, just arrived from his textile friend in London, and his eyes were bright with certainty. Those handkerchiefs with the green threads were in his pocket, and I knew they were the key to everything. The missing will, the cyanide from Hartley's bag, the tampered lock, the hidden romance between Clara and Hartley, Graves' secret about the argument. They were all pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot was ready to show the picture. Inspector Japp burst in, his coat damp from the morning drizzle. "Right," he said, his voice sharp. "We're close, Poirot. That trap last night shook them up. Vivian's faint, Langley's temper. Someone's cracking." Poirot nodded, his voice calm. "Oui, Inspector. The killer feels the pressure. Tonight we shall reveal the truth. But first, a discovery." He held up the letter, his eyes gleaming. "My friend in London, he confirms the green thread is not just French silk, but from a theatrical costume made for a Paris playhouse. Only someone in the theatre would have such a cloth." The room went quiet, all eyes on Poirot. Miss Vivian's cup clattered, her face pale. "Theatre? That's absurd," she said, her voice shaky. Langley snorted. "What's that got to do with anything? I'm no actor." Graves spoke softly. "I was never in theatre, sir. Just a butler." Clara frowned. "I've never been to a playhouse, Mr. Poirot." Edward nodded. "Nor me." Hartley adjusted his glasses. "I'm a doctor, not a performer." Japp frowned. "Theatre, Poirot? You're saying the killer's an actor?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not an actor, Inspector, but someone who knows the stage. The thread. It is the clue everyone missed, except Poirot." I leaned forward. "You mean Miss Vivienne? She was in Paris plays." Her eyes widened, her hand to her chest. "Me? Because I was an actress? That's cruel." Poirot held up the handkerchief, the green thread glinting. "This, mademoiselle, was found in the study near the poisoned brandy. Another in the drawing-room the night before. The sea, says Clara, but the thread says Paris, says theatre, says you." Vivian stood, her voice sharp. "I didn't kill Reggie. I loved him long ago." Japp crossed his arms. "You've got a past with him, Miss Leroux. And you were in Paris. That thread's looking bad for you." She swayed, then sat, her face white. I can't believe this." Poirot turned to the others. "Mesdames et messieurs, the thread is the killer's mistake. They left it to point at Mademoiselle Clara, but it points back to them. Tonight we shall gather, and the truth will come." The day was tense, the house buzzing with whispers. Clara clung to Edward, her eyes scared. Langley drank in the library, muttering about nonsense. Miss Vivian stayed in her room, claiming a headache. Hartley kept to himself, his bag close. Graves moved silently, his eyes on Poirot. That evening, Poirot called everyone to the drawing-room. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. Clara sat with Edward, her hand in his. Hartley stood by a window, his face tight. Langley slouched in an armchair, a glass in hand. Miss Vivian sat straight, her eyes red but defiant. Graves stood by the door, his face blank. Poirot stood in the centre, his voice clear. "Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald was murdered, poisoned in his study, the door locked, the will gone. But the killer left a clue, one they thought small." He held up the handkerchief. "This, with its green thread, is the secret weapon." Jim paced, his eyes on each guest. The lock was tampered with, a thin tool used to open it. The cyanide came from Dr. Hartley's bag, taken when he played billiards. The will was stolen to confuse us. But the thread, it is French silk, from a theatrical costume. Only one here knows such costumes. Vivian stood, her voice breaking. "Stop it! I didn't do it!" Poirot turned to her, his eyes kind but firm. "Mademoiselle Leroux, You loved Sir Reginald, yes? But he hurt you long ago. He took your heart, your money, left you with nothing. You came here seeking revenge." She shook her head, tears falling. "No, I wouldn't." Poirot held up the handkerchief. "This thread, it is from your costumes, made in Paris for your plays. You took Clara's handkerchief, added the thread to frame her. You took the cyanide, slipped it in the brandy, used a pin to open the lock. You argued with Sir Reginald that night. Graves heard a voice, a woman's, not a man's." Graves nodded, his voice low. I wasn't sure, but yes, a woman's voice." Vivian collapsed, sobbing. "All right, I did it. Reggie ruined me, stole my savings, broke my heart. I came to make him pay. I took the cyanide, used Clara's handkerchief to point at her. I thought the thread wouldn't matter." Wajibu stepped forward, his face grim. "Vivian LaRue, you're under arrest." Clara gasped, Edward holding her. Langley swore. Hartley looked stunned. Graves stayed silent. Poirot's voice was soft. "The thread, mademoiselle. It was the clue everyone missed, but not Poirot." As Japp led Vivienne away, the house felt lighter, but the shadows remained. The killer was caught, but the truth was heavy. The green thread, so small, had unravelled the lie, and Poirot's little grey cells had won again. Chapter 14. The Final Denouement. The 11th day at Ashbourne Hall broke with a pale sun, as if the house itself sighed in relief. The grand manor, with its tall windows and polished floors, felt less like a prison now, but the scars of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder lingered. The air was lighter, yet heavy with the truth we'd uncovered. I, Captain Hastings, sat in the drawing-room, my tea warm for once, watching the guests try to make sense of it all. Clara Ashbourne sat on a velvet sofa, her face still pale, but her eyes brighter, holding Edward Marlowe's hand. Edward, her fiancé, looked tired but relieved. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Mr. Langley sat in an armchair, his brandy glass empty, his face less red, more thoughtful. Dr. Hartley stood by a window, his medical bag at his feet, his glasses catching the light. Mr. Graves, the butler, moved silently, clearing cups with a face that hid his thoughts. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his suit crisp, his moustache perfect. He held the two handkerchiefs with the green threads, his eyes calm but triumphant. The missing will, the cyanide, the tampered lock, the hidden romance, Graves's secret, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and Poirot had solved it. Miss Vivian LaRue's confession last night had cracked the case open, and now, in true Poirot fashion, he wanted to explain it all. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook closed, his face a mix of respect and frustration. "Right, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "You've got your killer. Vivienne's in custody, but let's hear it. How do you know?" Poirot smiled, his voice clear. "Mesdames et messieurs, gather, please. The truth, it must be told with order and method. Sir Reginald's murder was a crime of passion planned with care, but undone by one small thing, the clue everyone missed." The guests leaned forward, even Langley, who usually scoffed. Clara clung to Edward, her eyes wide. Hartley adjusted his glasses, attentive. Graves stood still, his hands clasped. Poirot held up the first handkerchief, the blue sea clear, the green thread glinting. "This," he said, was found in the drawing-room the night before the murder. Another in the study, near the poisoned brandy. They seemed to point to Mademoiselle Clara, with her C. But the green thread, it was the secret weapon. He paced, his eyes bright. The thread is French silk, rare, from a theatrical costume made in Paris. Only someone in the theatre, someone like Mademoiselle Vivienne, would have such a cloth. She confessed last night, but let us see how the pieces fit. Clara whispered, "Why me? Why use my handkerchief?" Poirot turned to her, his voice kind. "Mademoiselle, you were the perfect target. Vivienne knew your father's will favoured you. She wanted to point suspicion at you, to hide her own crime. She took your handkerchiefs, old ones from your mother, and added the thread, thinking it would go unnoticed." Edward frowned. "But why kill Sir Reginald?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mademoiselle Vivienne, she loved Sir Reginald long ago. He was her lover. But he betrayed her, took her money, left her with nothing. She came to Ashbourne Hall seeking revenge. She planned it well." He held up the second handkerchief. "The night of the murder, she used a pin to open the studies. Lock, old, loose, easy for a clever hand. She argued with Sir Reginald as Monsieur Graves heard. Not a man's voice, but hers, sharp with anger. She poured cyanide, stolen from Dr. Hartley's bag, into the brandy, knowing Sir Reginald's habit." Hartley spoke up, his voice low. "My bag was in the billiard-room. She must have taken it then." Poirot nodded. "Oui, doctor. You played. Alone, your bag unguarded for moments. Vivienne, she is quick, sly. She took the cyanide, mixed it with the brandy, left the handkerchief to point at Clara." Langley leaned forward, his voice rough. "And the will? Why take it?" Poirot smiled. "The will, it was her final trick. She stole it from the safe. Sir Reginald's combination was known to her from their old days. She hid it to confuse us, to make us think Clara or another wanted the money. But the thread, it betrayed her." Japp frowned. "Where's the will now?" Poirot turned to Graves. "Monsieur Graves, you have served this house well. Last night, after Mademoiselle Vivienne's confession, you found something, yes?" Graves hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir. I searched her room, on your hint. The will was hidden in a false bottom of her suitcase." He handed Poirot a folded document, sealed with wax. Poirot opened it, scanning the pages. "It is as Monsieur Thompson said. Clara inherits the estate, with smaller gifts to others. Mademoiselle Vivienne, she hoped to delay its discovery, to cast doubt." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Father wanted me to have it." Edward squeezed her hand. "You're free now, Clara." Hartley stepped forward, his voice soft. "Clara, I'm sorry for hiding our feelings. I'll step aside, if that's what you want." Clara blushed, looking at Edward, then Hartley. "I love you both, in different ways. But, Edward, you've stood by me. I choose you." Edward smiled, his face lighting up. Hartley nodded, his eyes sad but kind. "I understand." Japp clapped his hands. "Well, Poirot, you've done it again. That thread. I thought it was nothing, but you saw it all." Poirot bowed slightly. "The little grey cells, Inspector, they see what others miss. The thread was Vivienne's mistake. She thought it small, but to Poirot it was everything." Langley stood, his voice gruff. "Guess I was wrong about you, Poirot. Good work." Graves spoke softly. "The house will be quieter now, sir." Poirot turned to me, his eyes twinkling. "Hastings, you see. The smallest clue, it holds the biggest truth." I nodded, still amazed. "You never doubted that thread, did you?" He smiled. "Never, mon ami. It was the secret weapon, the clue everyone missed." The guests scattered, Clara and Edward walking to the garden, hand in hand. Hartley packed his bag, ready to leave. Langley headed to the library, sober for once. Graves began cleaning, his face calm again. Japp shook Poirot's hand, muttering, "You're a wonder, Poirot." As the sun set, Ashbourne Hall felt alive again. Its shadows gone. The will was found, the killer caught, the truth laid bare. Those green threads, so small, had unravelled a web of lies, and Poirot's little grey cells had triumphed. The house was free, and so were we, thanks to the clue everyone missed but Hercule Poirot.